And if you're just joining us for the first time, what we do on the Weekend Boost is we like to feature authors, people of note, community leaders, interesting people, interesting human beings, people who are making a difference in the world. I am the author of the Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. Guys, if you are interested in getting a copy of this book, whether on ebook or a hard copy book, paullane.net is my website. It is up and running, paullane.net. You can order the book right online there. Please go on there and take a look. I am at your service. Also, I do offer other services. I do offer speaking engagements, motivational speaking. I do life coaching. I am going to be offering very soon a new service called chemo care. So if you have a loved one who has cancer and is would like to get some relief, I can guarantee you that after an hour with me, they will look better, feel better, or have a better sense of well-being. So that being said, I want to just go ahead and get into the show. We have some really, really good upcoming books to talk about, and the first one I want to talk about, probably on my next show, I'm going to be talking about Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. If you have never heard of this book, this is a 10-year anniversary of the book. Oh my gosh, this is an eye-opener. This is a real head-scratcher because this book really, really lays it out about what happened in America over the last 200 years, how it's affected you, how it's affected me, how what we all thought was racism was really just classism, and how the Jim Crow laws of the early, 1900s still exist, and how they still have ways to put people behind bars and to keep people in their place. So this is going to be a very, very good book, very powerful book, a book that's already made a big impact on me, and something that I think every American should be aware of and read. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to this book or not, but this 10x is easier than 2x. Oh my gosh. Sharon Rose Hayward sent me this book as a gift. I have been reading it. It is really, really intense. If you like self-help books, man, this is really, really an awesome book. I think it's going to be one that's going to be here to stay. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. My guest today is a best-selling author. She is an inspiration to me. I mean, I was fortunate enough to interview Reina Grande at the Denver Women's Press Club about 2 months ago on her book, A Ballad of Love and Glory. And this book is, oh my gosh, it's a historical fiction, but it's a book about the United States and how we stole Mexico. We stole Mexico. There's just no other way to put it. If you look historically, you'll see that we stole Mexico. If you look at unbiased news history, we stole Mexico. If you look at biased, we stole Mexico. But this story is so heartwarming and so touching because it goes into this fictional, while this actually was a real character, he was from Ireland, and he came to the United States to fight for the United States against Mexico. And what he found out was that Mexico was predominantly Catholic, as he was in Ireland. And when he started seeing people going into the churches, the American soldiers going into the churches that they had conquered, and letting their horse poop in the church and desecrating the crucifix and bringing out all of the sacred relics, they started becoming more and more upset about that. One day, this young soldier got a letter that was, well, actually it was a pamphlet or a flyer that had been just passed out to American soldiers. It was written by an American general. And what it said was, don't work for the United States, because he knew that the Irish were being brutalized. They were being really treated very cruelly. For example, if they caught you drinking, they would brand a brand on your cheek or on your forehead, and I mean burn a brand into you that indicated that you were a drunk. If you were unruly, they would literally take you and set you on a V-shaped sawhorse with your hands tied behind your back and make you sit on that sawhorse. He talked about someone that he saw fall off the sawhorse and break their neck and die. The U.S. soldiers were very, very cruel to anybody that was not lily white. I don't know any other way to say it. And this soldier decided that he was going to defect, and he went to fight for the Mexican army. And what he did was historical, and that part of the story is very true. They actually started a battalion of cannoneers, and they were almost all Irish. They called them the San Patricios, and if you've ever been to Mexico, the San Patricios are real. They are honored, and they are revered and respected by Mexican people, and they all came from Ireland, and they were bold and brave, and though they lost the war, they were all very, very powerful in their own right. This book, I really have to say, I don't want to compare an author to another author, but I am a big fan of Victor Villaseñor. And as I read this book, oh my gosh, I could just feel the emotion in her words. I could feel the heartbreak, the sadness, the confusion, all of the feelings and emotions that I think someone might feel who was going through a revolution, or what was going on in Southern America, southern part of America, how it could be. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book from beginning to end. It's a love story. John Riley was from Ireland, and he met a woman, Hefina, and they fell in love. And it was really a tremendous story of their overcoming so many obstacles, and how even through all of the war, all of the destruction, all of the death, they were still able to find love and find each other in this story. Reina has a way of taking a book and making it into something that you don't just read, you chew it. When you read Reina's words, I don't even know how to explain it. You feel enthralled, you feel engulfed, you feel just really a part of the story. You can get all of Reina's books on reinagrande.com. This is her latest one. Everywhere you turn in the book, there's action. Everywhere you turn in the book, there's something going on as far as romance, or as far as I mean, look at this. I'm a highlighting reader, and I read this section right here. It says, "In my dream, Nellie was frozen," and so Hefina was kind of psychic, and she would have dreams and things that were to come. And so she's talking about this dream, and she says, "In my dream, Nellie was frozen. What does that signify, Lass? Have you seen her in your visions?" "No," she said, "I only dream of the storm, men frozen. That night I knew I needed to wake up before it was too late. When he retired to his tent, he lay awake, his mind uneasy, until the day finally dawned." And as you get through this book, I don't care what page you turn to, there's so many very, very fascinating little tidbits. It's so cool to see a gifted writer insert themselves into a story, and as I read the story, I couldn't help but imagine that these emotions and these feelings were really part of Reina's heart. And unfortunately, I'm unable to reach her right now. Hopefully, Reina will get this and log in so we can have you on, Reina. I think that we might have had a miscommunication. I told her it was 10 o'clock, but I think I might have miscommunicated that it was Denver time, not Pacific time. So we're just going to go ahead and continue and go on and talk about the book. If you are familiar with American history, you know that at one time, all of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, part of Colorado, Utah, Nevada, much of all that was all Mexico. And through the unscrupulous dealings of the Mexican general or president, Santa Anna, all of that land was forfeited and given to Mexico. And what we were left with was what now became the Southwest United States. And Reina beautifully portrays this drama unfolding in a way that as you read it, you just feel like, wow. You feel heartbroken. I felt helpless. I felt so saddened. But I also picked up so many tidbits in this. For example, I talk about it on the show, how my ancestors went to bed one night and they were Mexican citizens, and they woke up in the morning and they were Americans. All of that's talked about in this book. Not directly, but all of those emotions and all of those things that people felt are very much involved in this story. And the fact is that the United States captured John Riley and tortured him, and they did unspeakable things to him. And I don't want to go too much in depth on it, but I can tell you that as you read this story and you see what happened to John Riley and how John Riley really stood up to the plate, and how John Riley, I believe, was really a man of great character. Another interesting thing that I really appreciated about this book is if you go into the beginning, there's a list of names in memory of, and all the names are here, and all of these people are listed in the book. And as you read it, you start seeing these names of these people, and they actually come alive, and they actually they're not just part of the book, but they're part of the history that was wound up and wrapped up to make this into a powerful book. I believe that this is one that could be moved into a story. So the last time I interviewed Reina, I was able to read this book, and I interviewed her in talking about this book and how well it was written, and how all of the emotions and how all of the experiences as she felt were so conveyed in a way that as I read it, I just wanted to read more. I wanted to turn the page. I wanted to get to the next part of the story because it was so emotional. It just gripped me, and I promise you, get this book. Yesterday I was talking to Mario Acevedo, and he is a member of CALMA, which, by the way, CALMA has shout out to Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. And Mario had just finished the book, and we were just chatting, and he says, it's so amazing that you can learn so much more real history from a fiction novel than you can from real history. And it's interesting because as you become more and more involved, and you start understanding more about writers and authors and how they write, you start understanding that these things are kind of the nature of the business, and it just literally makes it so much more interesting of a read. When I met Reina, I actually purchased a couple of books of hers, and her memoir was the book that I read, in preparation for today's show. And oh my gosh, this book really provided an insight to Reina's thinking, to how Reina came to be as an author, how immigrants struggle, and how immigrants feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're outsiders, and how, as I read this book of A Dream Called Home, it really talks about how Reina was literally abandoned by her parents and came to the United States at 9 years old. Her father left her mom for another woman, and then her mom decided to go and try to find another man to replace her husband, and the kids were left alone. And oh my gosh, guys, this book is a B. My wife loved, by the way, loved this book as well. She loved this one even more. But this book, to me, oh my gosh, if you look, I got so many marked pages in here, and I think what we may have to do is we may have to have Reina on another show, because these are topics that I believe only Reina is going to be able to really talk about, because it's so in depth and so personal. But I took the liberty of highlighting some key points that really stood out to me. After Reina came to the United States and then decided to go back to Mexico, she had some rude awakenings, because the people in Mexico no longer accepted her as Reina. They now saw her as Americanized, and probably called her a gringo, and so it was probably very difficult for her. And so, just like right here, really early in the book, it says, on my first return visit to Mexico 3 years earlier, everyone treated me like a foreigner because I had been corrupted by being Americanized. Whoa. To the people who had seen me grow up, I was no longer Mexican enough. But in the U.S., I wasn't American enough either. I got to tell you, when I read these words, I could so relate to them. I tell people, when you come here, if you're Mexican and you see me, a Chicano, I'm a gringo. Even people that speak fluent Spanish that are here, they're gringos. But to the Anglo-Americans, I'm a Mexican. And so, like her, and so I think I could relate to it so much because I felt like all my life was a man without a country. And part of the benefit that I've gained from doing this show is I've been able to really associate with some very talented authors who have revealed to me things that I didn't know about myself, about my culture, about how my family went to bed one night a Mexican and woke up American, and how we've always been kind of on the outside looking in, and all my life I've always felt like I was that foreigner, but even though I was born here, and I never knew why. But as I read through this book, I really could relate so much. Even though I wasn't an immigrant, even though I was an American citizen, I was born here, there was always a part of me that felt like I was either not enough, or that I didn't belong, or that I was not a part of the team, or I didn't fit into the whole. I can't explain it. I don't know why I felt that way. A lot of it had to do because I had an Anglo last name and I grew up in a Chicano neighborhood. But I digress. So the further I get into the book, the more Reina just revealed who she was, and her innocence was just so prevalent, and it was so refreshing to just see this young girl, who was just accepted at UCSC College and had never really been exposed to the wealth that was in California, in the United States. And when she got there, again, she felt like she didn't belong. She felt like she was an outsider, that she was on the outside looking in, and didn't really feel real comfortable. But time passed, and she was accepted. And in fact, there was one roommate of hers that really cared about her. And I take a quick sip. So what happened was, she was walking back to her dormitory one day, and her friend Carolyn grabbed her by the arm and said, "Come on, Reina, you gotta come and go to this." And she's like, "What is it?" She goes, "It's about your people." And she's looking, Reina's looking at this girl like, "What? What do you mean it's my people? What are you talking about?" Well, what it was, there was a legislation back in California back in the 1990s. It was called Prop 209. And Prop 209 eliminated affirmative action in colleges throughout California. And so it gave college educators the right to legally discriminate against people of color. And so Reina, who had only been exposed to 3 or 4 Latinos in her experience at the college at UCSC, came into this setting where there were hundreds and hundreds of people of color, Chicano, Latinos, Mexicanos, Asians, black people, and white people, men, women. There were all these people, and they were all standing up, and they were all standing for a vision. They were all standing for equal rights. They were all standing because they were not satisfied with the way things are. I've heard it said that if you are not making the progress you would like to make and are capable of making, it is simply because your goals are not clearly defined. Well, Reina's goals were clearly defined here. And when she became aware of this Prop 209, and she became aware that there were all these other Latino Chicanos, all of a sudden she found this sense of being, this sense of belonging. And she realized that, I shouldn't go back home and give up. I'm not the only immigrant in the world. I'm not the only Mexican citizen that's American, a naturalized citizen in this school. And it gave her hope. And so all through the book, there are defining moments in Reina's life where she was able to really grasp the reality of life, or she was able to really come into her own as a woman, as a daughter, as a student. She had a lot of self-doubt, like we all do. You know, it's very difficult when you're young to realize how great you are. It's really difficult for you to see that you could become a best-selling author. It's really difficult, especially when you're in the presence of people who verbally or non-verbally think of you as less than. And so, you know, like my mom told me, Hito, it's a very hard world out there. You're going to have to do twice the work to get half the credit. And I understood after a time. I understood what she meant, and it was very true. There was times when, you know, even with affirmative action, it wasn't enough to give me an equal fair footing. And you know, people of color, you can relate to that. And it was a very difficult time for Reina. All through this, Reina's juggling all these different issues. She had a little sister. What happened when her mother went back to the United States? She had another child, a little sister named Betty, and Betty was, you know, like many of us, a wayward child. And so Reina took her sister Betty under her wing and actually brought her to the college to live on the dorm. She didn't care. Whatever it took, she was going to take care of familia. And that's one of the things I love about the Chicano-Mexican culture, is the value of family. So she took her sister in, and you know, things were going pretty good there for a while, because her sister was really in a bad way. You know, she was failing in school. She was having problems with men. I mean, she had a lot of issues. So it was wonderful that Reina was able to take her sister Betty in and help take care of her. There's a highlighted section that I have here in the end of chapter 5. It says, "It was then that I realized that the protest that I talked about in, you know, Prop 209, the protest did have a profound effect on me. That is, it led me to a place of belonging and brought me closer to making Santa Cruz and the university my home." You see, up until this point, Reina did not feel very welcome in this place. And even though most of the people reached out and made an effort, she still felt very alone. She still felt very isolated. She still felt like, you know, this college is a long way from home. You know, and she always longed for her family relationship and her family love. And so fast forward to when Betty had actually gone back to live with the mom, and she had gone, you know, on a bad path, and Betty was sent back to Mexico, you know, in the novel here, in the memoir. And so Reina didn't want to see her sister back in Mexico. She didn't want to see her sister fail. She wanted her sister to have all the opportunities that Reina had had. And so she decided somehow to figure out how to get enough money to go back to Mexico. And she did. So Reina went all the way back to Mexico and went to where she grew up. And so I'm going to get my notes so that I can refer to what I, you know, sorry about that, guys. The town where she was from was a town called, I believe, Iguala. And Iguala is the town where the Mexican flag was made. So there was a lot of historical significance there. And one of the things that she wanted to do was to get in touch with her grandmother, her abuela, Chinta. And she had actually two grandmothers, and her grandmother Chinta was very loving and very kind and very accepting and very supportive, whereas her grandmother Evila, which was a very interesting name, was a very, very cruel and brutal woman. In fact, they were so poor that the grandmother would give them just, you know, whatever there was to just keep them alive. And she was always punishing the grandkids. And Grandma Evila, Abuela Evila, would send the kids out into the backyard and thinking they were being, she was punishing them, the kids would go in the backyard and they would pick all these fruits off the trees, and they would go and eat all of the leaves of plants and the roots, and they found out that a lot of it was edible and a lot of it was good. And so what the grandmother thought was a punishment was actually an opportunity for them to go and fill their little empty bellies. At that time, they were plagued. I mean, these kids were plagued with tapeworms, with hunger. They were just completely poverty-stricken. And all the time they heard about this place called El Otro Lago. The Otro Lado, Lado, the other land. And they heard stories of this other land, that it was what we call the land of milk and honey, the land of opportunity, as close as you could get to paradise. And when she finally received it, she saw that it was very, very much like paradise, but there were some points missing, and what it was family. But when we back to the book, Iguala was a town of 110,000 people. The first Mexican flag was made in 1824 in Iguala, which is pretty interesting. As she was there in this town, her days were coming to an end, and she decided that she was going to go see her other grandmother, and it was, not because she wanted to, because she really didn't want to, but because it was very, very much the custom that you do not disrespect your elders. But what she remembered about her grandmother was not good memories. She remembered her grandmother. One time her uncle came, and he was from the other side of the family, and he had some ice cream for the kids, and the three kids were in the backyard, her and her sister Mago, and I believe Carlos was the brother. And they were in the backyard, in the grandmother's backyard, and he came and brought them ice cream, and the grandmother came out and said, "You're not giving that ice cream to these kids." And she took the ice cream from the kids, and she set it on the sidewalk and made them sit there and watch it melt. And after a time, the ice cream got more and more liquefied, and finally one of them says, "Heck with it, I don't care what Grandma says. Abuelita says, I'm going to go," and ate all that ice cream. And, there's just so many little glimpses into her childhood that just really are fitting to the title, A Dream Called Home. The poverty was so bad there. They would eat, in a taco they would have a corn tortilla and a little tomato, and there were no beans, there was no rice. They were very poor, very, very poor. And she thought to herself, man, how do they even stay alive? So it was very, very difficult for her. One of the things that was I thought a defining moment for her, and I really appreciated it, was this rich family, and they were very wealthy, and Reina noticed that these people spoke proper Spanish, and she herself, especially because she had been involved in school at UCSC, and how she had already been in the United States for some time. When she came back to Mexico, her Spanish was already challenged, and so she had some real experiences with all of that. Lost my train of thought there. The poverty was so bad there, though. One day, she wanted to take Betty swimming, and when they were kids, this place was like a country club, and it was a place where you could go swim, but it was completely out of range for them, because in Mexico, people made an average of $5 a week, and to go to this swimming pool was $2. And now Reina was able to take her sister, and she had the money now to even go 2 times a day if she wanted to. And Reina and her sister were really able to appreciate that swimming pool, and just to really live like the rich folks. So I thought that was a pretty important point of note. Here it is. I'm going to read this to you. I thought the way she wrote this, I love this style. To Betty and me, going to pool was a triumph of sorts. As little girls, we only had been able to dream of swimming there, since our family would never have been able to afford it.
Now I could afford to go with my sister every day, or twice a day if we decided. The admission price per person was $2, but in a city where people made less than, $5 a day, that was a fortune. The bitter irony was that absolutely no one from the neighborhood could afford a day of fun at the local swimming pool. Whew, man, that is so reminiscent of my own childhood growing up when I used to be on the outside looking in. I remember, seeing the haves and the have-nots, and I never knew that. I thought everybody got their clothes at the second-hand store, and I remember being in school one day and two boys were joking with each other, and one said, "Hey, I saw you at the Segunda." And I was so embarrassed because all the clothes that I wore were from that same Segunda that he was at. And, now I'm much more comfortable with myself, but I could so understand and relate to the words that were written in that book. Another reason why you need to own it. Reina had a lot of built-up frustration based on all the things that she'd experienced and the things that she'd seen. And there's little sections that I've highlighted, and I just want to read this. And she's sitting there with her aunt, and her aunt was telling her that she has to respect her grandmother, as I mentioned earlier, and she's telling her, you have to go see your abuelita. And she goes, I don't want to. I really don't want to. She was mean to me. She was cruel to me. And now her abuela is 86-year-old, and she's the size of an 8-year-old child. Osteoporosis had shrunk her, and her memory was completely gone. And she looked at Reina, and she said, Abuela, don't you know me? And she looked up at Reina and she smiled and she said, Vámonos! In a raspy voice, different from the sharp, loud voice I remembered. It's late. Appa is waiting for his lunch. Come on. Where's the donkey? What donkey? I asked. Her aunt says she thinks you're her sister. What do you mean? Well, she's become a child again to Abuela. We don't exist to her anymore. My aunt sighed and left the room. I sat there swimming in my anger and disappointment all these years, longing for an apology from this woman, and this is all I would get. She didn't deserve to end life like this, free from all the hurt and pain she had caused. Memory loss for her was a blessing, one that she didn't deserve. Man, can you relate to that in your life? Have you had someone who has weighed heavy on you and you just long for the day when you could come back and just give them a piece of your mind? I'm kind of watching for Reina to see if she logs in here, and I'm still not seeing her, so we'll just keep going. Listen to this. This was so powerful. So Reina was really internalizing this hurt of not being able to address her grandmother who had been so cruel to her in her lifetime. And so she closes out by saying, I didn't know that would be the last time I'd see my grandmother alive. In 3 months she would leave this world and join the father she had so longed for. The legacy that she would leave me was the realization that there was something I had inherited from her. For years now, I had been plucking at the invisible sores in my heart. The wounds of my childhood that festered and would not heal. But just like my grandmother, I found the strength to survive. Oh my gosh, I love that. That was such a wonderful statement. I found the strength to survive. And even through all of that anger and all of that hurt, she found it in her spirit to find some relationship with her grandmother. Hey guys, if you're just joining us, you're watching the Weekend Boost on KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. And I am talking about author Reina Grande. Reina is scheduled on a Zoom, and I'm kind of worried that I might have told her 10 o'clock and she might have guessed that it was California time, the Pacific time. But we're going ahead and we're talking about this memoir that she had written. I'm also talking, kind of going back and forth to a ballad of love and glory. This is a historical fiction novel. It took 7 years to write this book. Reina actually had to go back, went to Ireland to do more research. And when you read this book, oh my gosh, you can actually feel the wind on your face. You can actually feel the flowers. You can smell the flowers as they walk through the pathways. You can hear the cannons fire and see the cannon fodder splattered on the ground. I mean, you could literally just feel it because it's so emotionally involved. ReinaGrande.com is where you can find this book. Reach out to us at the station if you'd like to, if you can't find it there. But it is a great book. I found mine at the Barnes & Noble bookstore, so it's out there. Please make it, do yourself a favor, give yourself the gift of a good book. Reina had a lot of disappointment, and she had a lot of discouragement, and she had a lot of people that didn't believe in her. And as she was in UCSC College, she had a teacher who, I don't even know any other way to put this except that this teacher was a very, very strong racist, and she didn't like Reina's style, and she would tell Reina, "Oh, you just override and you over dramatize, and I don't like your writing's just not right. You have a long way to go." And I'm going to get to it in just a little bit, but isn't it like that in our life when we have someone who doesn't believe in us, and there's someone, and even if they don't use words, looks at you and they say, "You can't do it. I don't believe in you. You don't have what it takes." And then you turn around and you prove them wrong. I remember when I was in the military, and my brother sent me a letter, and he said, "Oh, so-and-so, one of my aunts is saying that you're not going to make it in the military. You're going to drop out. You're going to get a dishonorable discharge." And you know, at that time, I was a pretty bad, it was really in my first 3 weeks in the military, I had a bad attitude, and I probably was about to get kicked off. I mean, I wasn't in trouble or anything, but I probably would have gotten myself in trouble. But when I got that letter telling me that I had people betting against me, I doubled down on my efforts, and I made the choice to be the best soldier I could be. And you know what I did? I did everything I set out to do. I served. I became a good soldier. And I got my honorable discharge in spite of what anyone thought of me. I had a successful 28-year marriage. I've owned homes. I don't have a college degree, but I've done a lot of things without it. And so the point of it is, when there's someone that's shooting you down, and I'm going to get more in depth on it in a bit, you can't listen to them. Their words need to be inspiration, not crushing. But I want to talk about her faith. You know, the challenges that Reina faced as a child were insurmountable. Her father used to like to drink, and they would want to go to church, and she'd say, "Daddy, let's go to church." And he'd hold up his beer. He says, "This is my God." And oh, can you imagine how brutally hurtful that had to be, you know, for a father who really wasn't there for you. So when she was in Mexico, you know, she was with her grandma, abuela Chinta, and she was, you know, talking to her about church, and she was talking to her about religion, and Reina wrote these words. She said, "What would she say if I told her I had rejected any religion that made me feel devalued as a woman, or which pressed upon me the belief that being poor was a good thing, or that all the misery in my life was God's will, and I should just shut up and not complain?" I read these words, and I could so understand and relate to what she was talking about, because man, I've so many times I felt like that, and I felt the guilt of religion on me, and you know, and so it's very, very important, if you do have religion or faith, that you are able to differentiate yourself from those demeaning attitudes or feelings. So that teacher that I was talking about would tell her, you know, your work is over the top written, your work is flowery, too full of cliches. "Oh, I love your writing right now. I love it." There were times I wanted to run out of my classroom and never come back. "What am I doing here?" I thought. "Who do I think I am to even consider that my stories are worth telling?" Man, I'm so glad you didn't listen to her, Reina. Hadn't my own grandmother survived the Mexican Revolution? If I allowed rejection to defeat me, my dreams would fester. I would be eaten by maggots. How could I allow that to happen? And then she met her dear friend, Marta Navarro. And I talk about these points because these were the influential points and I believe defining moments that changed Martha. And so Martha was talking to her friend who was a teacher in Chicano literature at UCSC. Martha Navarro read her writings and she didn't give her that same discouraging news. In fact, Martha said, "Reina, your writing reminds me of Juan Rulfo." Who? I asked. Juan Rulfo, as it turned out, was one of the finest writers of his generation. Martha gave me a Spanish copy of the Burning Plain and other stories by Pedro Paramo. Rulfo writes about nature as something beautiful and powerful, but also as a menace, something that destroys, Martha said. The towns he writes about are poor and forsaken, populated by people who are lonely and destitute. He writes about men who leave and don't return, floods that devastate neighborhoods. These things you write about too, Reina. It isn't melodrama. It's your truth. So someone may not like you for no other reason than the color of your skin or your gender. And I don't care what your gender is. I don't care what the color of your skin is. I'm not just talking about people of color. Maybe there's someone who has an influence over you who treats you bad because you're not a person of color, and they are. It's inexcusable. We are equal, and we should treat each other as such. But Martha made a huge difference in the life of Reina Grande. And as she started writing, she got involved and started entering her writings in contests and anthologies, and she was accepted. And so Reina was able to really put a lot of that negativity behind her only through her own efforts and through her own writing, and she was able to see that she was a good writer, and she became a great writer. I loved how, there's a part in the book where Reina talked about, going in the water and how she was afraid of the water, and all the time she was in Monterrey, she hardly ever went in the water. She had a 5-year-old cousin drown in the water, and so that was, that was kind of one of the influences on her life. When I translated the lyrics, oh my gosh, this is the fantastic scene. When she was in Mexico, there was a rich family. I started talking about Oscar. And Oscar had a son, Oscar Jr., and she would hear them speak, and their language was so beautiful. And someone came, I believe it was Martha, came to her and said, "Look, you speak your own Spanish. You are a blend of Mexico, of the United States, of white America, of brown America, and the language you speak is not bad. It's not good. It's just different." Spanglish. And those of you who are from Colorado, you know what Spanglish is, see? And so Spanglish was the language that she became comfortable with, and there was nothing wrong with that. She didn't have to speak perfect Castilian Spanish. She spoke fluent Spanish. Spanglish. Not only did I speak incorrect Spanish because of my family's poverty, but growing up in America had added yet another layer to my native tongue. So it's such an interesting dynamic that she saw this as something that would hold her back, and Martha saw this as something that made her so much more. And that's what you need to do, and I need to do, is we need to see ourselves as so much more, not less. You bring so much more because what you have wasn't there before. And so you're filling a void that needed to be filled. So she was there, and Oscar and her sisters, this wealthy family, are there, and they hear this song, and they're saying, "Oh, tell us the lyrics. What does it mean?" And oh man, she says, it was worth all the work it took to learn English to be able to have this moment to translate this into Spanish for them. And so she translated the words. When I translated the lyrics for them, she says, my painful struggle to learn English suddenly seemed worth it, just so I could have this moment. Seeing the profound admiration in the eyes of these rich young people who up until then had seen me as the poor little girl who deserved their pity and required their charity, but no more. then it goes down, and I highlighted this. If they treat you differently in Mexico, it is because you are different, Martha said. She's talking to Martha now. In a tender voice of hers I had grown to love. You are now bilingual, bicultural, binational. You are not less, you are more. Then we talk about Martha's Chicano literature class, and man, I know it seems like I'm spending a lot of time in these. Man, these are so important. There was a poem that she read. It was the work of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, a feminist nun who lived in the 17th century in Mexico. I'm going to do my best to read this. Please forgive me. I'm not probably going to pronounce these words right, but I'm going to do my best. Hombres necio que acusáis a la mujer sin razón, sin ver que lo sois la ocasión de lo mismo que culpáis. Stupid men, quick to condemn women wrongly for their flaws, never seeing you're the cause of all that you blame on them. I'm a feminist, man. I believe it's time for a woman president. I believe it's time for woman leadership. And when I read these words, I had to say that she's right. Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, your words were right. Never seeing you're the cause that all you blame on them. I memorialized her poem, Reina says, and repeated it to myself as a mantra. Another time, Martha gave me the excerpt from Borderlands From La Frontera by Gloria Azul-Dua. At the time, Ansaldua lived in Santa Cruz. Although I never had the opportunity to meet her, her words resonated with me. Listen to this. The U.S.-Mexico border es una herida abierta where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. And before the scab I'm going to start over. The U.S.-Mexico border es una herida abierta where the third world grates against the first and bleeds, and before a scab forms on it, hemorrhages again. The lifeblood of two worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture, wrote Ansaldua. Man, I just thought that was such a beautifully written statement. The two worlds blend together to create a third. And the Reina had experience after experience after experience, and each one of these defining moments made her a better human being, made her a better person. As she went on, as she got more and more experienced, she came on and met a woman who wrote a book, A Farewell to Manzanar, and the author, Jean Watsuki Houston, had written it. And when Reina read this book, it completely changed her life again. It completely opened her eyes and helped her to understand that let me just read it. When Jean Watsuki Houston spoke that night at the Kursky Town Hall, something changed for me. I recognized my struggle in her story as she shared her difficulties in trying to navigate American culture while trying to hold on to her Japanese heritage. She couldn't find books that she could relate to, books that spoke about difficult experiences her family had endured in the internment camp. She wrote the book that she couldn't find. She wrote the book that she couldn't find. She wrote the book that she couldn't find. Maybe that's a message for you. Through Farewell to Manzanar, she became a voice to her people and others, like me. When I learned to read English in 8th grade, I remembered feeling that same desperation that she spoke about, the need to find books I could relate to. As a child immigrant from Mexico struggling to adapt to the new American way of life, I had a hard time finding my experiences reflected in my books given to me by my teachers at school or the librarian at the public library. Instead, I grew up reading stories, mostly about white middle-class kids whose only worry was what kind of pet to get, or what to wear to the prom. I say it every week, and I say it with all true meaning. Everybody's looking for a hero. If you can't find a hero, be a hero. Reina has just poured out her heart in these books. The third book, there's another one. It's called The Distance Between Us that I definitely want to get my hands on very soon. But this is another book. It's called Dancing with Butterflies. So I have 3 books of Reina's that I'm featuring today. You know, A Ballad of Love and Glory, A Dream Called Home, and then this one, Dancing with Butterflies. I'm just going to read to you off the back of it. A novel full of music, motion, and heart about 4 women whose stories and friendships are as rich as the folklorico dance that brought them together. Dancing with Butterflies is told through the alternating voices of 4 very different women whose lives interconnect through a common passion for their Mexican heritage and a dance company called Alegría. Yesenia, who founded Alegría with her husband, Eduardo, sabotages her own efforts to remain a vital, vibrant woman when she travels back and forth across the Mexican border for cheap plastic surgery. Elena, grief-stricken by the death of her only child and the end of her marriage, finds herself falling dangerously in love with one of her underage students. Elena's sister Adriana wears the wounds of abandonment by a dysfunctional family and becomes unable to discern love from abuse. Boy, does that sound familiar. Soledad, the sweet-tempered illegal immigrant who designs costumes for Alegría, finds herself stuck in Mexico where she returns to see her dying grandmother. Beautiful, heartfelt, and engaging, Dancing with Butterflies, an exquisite novel that demonstrates the power of human connection. Woo, man, that sounds like a good read. And I guarantee you, if it's anything like these 2, whoo, it's going to be a page-turner. It's going to be a really, really difficult book to put down. But guys, I'm really sorry that I was not able to have Reina on the show today because she has such a plethora of information, such a storehouse of useful knowledge that can be applied, and useful stuff. If you're thinking about becoming a writer, that you must have these books in your hands. You must have them to help you to overcome the things that you're seeing and things you can't see that are insurmountably holding you back from where you want to be. If your goals are not clearly defined, reading books like these is what's going to give you that stronghold, that foothold that's going to give you the ability to write a page, and the next page, and the next page, and the next chapter. Guys, I do not accept that there's not a book in you. I do not accept that you're afraid to write it. I do not accept that you don't know what it takes, because I didn't know what it takes. Reina did not know what it took. I encourage you guys to pick up your tablet and start typing now. It really, I don't care if you write a poem, I don't care if you write a blog, I don't care if you write a short story. There needs to be something left behind when you leave this earth. Not just memories, but something tangible, something that someone could pick up and say, I knew her. I never knew this about her. Oh, that's how she got that strong feeling or emotion of whatever the case may be. Oh, that's how Reina Grande became such a prolific writer. Wow. Maybe the discouraging words I've been hearing from my writing teacher are not words I should listen to. Or maybe I knew I had it in me all the time. Are the words that you need to hear from yourself. But guys, there's a book in you. There's a story in you. There's a poem in you. There's a blog in you. There's a short story in you. And it's waiting to come out. And it wants to be heard. And it needs to be read. And the only thing holding it back is the person holding that keyboard. The person looking back at me from the other side of the screen. Guys, I do have my website up and running. It's paullane.net. Please log in. Send me an email. Send me a note telling me where you are in the world. We have, I just received, recently I received a note from Henry saying that we have 165,000 worldwide listeners. I'd like to hear from you. PaulLane.net. Send us a message through Facebook. Send me an email. Let me know that you hate the show. Let me know you like the show. Guys, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And everybody is looking for a hero. Everybody's looking for a hero. And if you can't find one, you better be one. Because he's not there, she's not going to pop out of the wood. She's going to be there when you look in the mirror. I've always said you will astound yourself when you accomplish a fraction of what you're capable of. I have completely, I still feel that way. And I don't believe that you should give up. I don't think you have an excuse to give up. I don't think that you want to give up. Get that book. Write that story. The world is waiting for you. You've been watching The Weekend Boost. I'm your host, Paul Lane, the author of The Caregiver's Handbook, a self-help love story. Again, PaulLane.net. If you'd like to get a copy of your own, email me. I'll get an autographed copy out to you. Also available on ebook. Guys, I told you a little bit about what I'm doing. I'm becoming a healer. I'm becoming a healer, and I am working with people in need. I'm working with sick people. I'm working with depressed people. I'm working with the people who are afraid. Reach out to me through my website. Send me an email if you're interested in getting some frequency treatments. If you're interested in learning about chakra realignment. If you're interested in learning about yourself, I'm here. I'm at your service. I guarantee you, you will either look better, feel better, or have a better sense of well-being. Upcoming things, as I mentioned, we're going to be having a good talk on our next show about the new Jim Crow book. Michelle Alexander. We're going to talk in depth about the new Jim Crow. We're going to talk about what's going on in the United States. So brace yourself, because it's not an easy read, and it's not something that you're going to feel good about, because it's going to open your eyes to a lot of things that are happening in this country that we're not happy about, and you shouldn't be either. What we do to change it. Guys, you've been watching The Weekend Boost. I am your host, Paul Lane. This is KUHS, The Stream on Melody Drive. Stay tuned for Mr. International, Paul Chavez. He's coming up right up with deep cuts. And then Henry Archuleta is going to be putting on some good soul sounds for you through the rest of the day. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks.